Hello everyone and welcome to a build guide and review of Brieg. Now, to be honest with you, some of this stuff here is probably going to be adjacent to the FNA guide if you have watched that already, because Brieg, once again, it's a PvE focused character, so there's not a lot to talk about for these type of characters, especially Brieg, since he's highly usable in many places of the game. But I'll give you a rundown on how to use the character, where to use the character, and how to build him most importantly. There's some example builds as well as sets or characters you can use with the character. Alright, so first and foremost, let's familiarize ourselves with the kit. Now, my Brieg is not plus 15, so the Molagores are a little bit off, so I'll just read out to you what they are supposed to be. So there's no percentage values on anything but the S1, so just assume the S1 is a 20% combat readiness push and not 17. As for the rest of it, the Molagores on the S2 is for barrier strength, and the Molagores on the S3 is for damage. Now, if you're at the beginning of the game, I do actually recommend Molagoring this character if you're going to be using him quite a bit. I just never needed to do it because, well, I've been playing the game for a very long time, so I already cleared all the content in the game, so I didn't necessarily need to use him, but for your newer players, if you want to get through the content, he is worth your Molagores. That being said, generally you're going to be using Brieg for his defense break and his speed down, which is very impactful in PvE content. Barriers to help keep your team alive. Perception helps making gearing your character a lot more easier because of the crit chance and crit damage, meaning your stats are a bit higher than what you think it is, and the CR pushing allows for more cycling. Now, once you gain max fighting spirit, something to note is that with Brieg's S1 is going to reactivate your skill 3 limited sword arts here, which means you have another chance of defense breaking and speed downing your target, as well as it will dispel all buffs off of you. So if you have some pesky debuffs on you like a bleed burn, maybe a death break, you will get cleansed. So some important things to note, he is one of the top 3 best units in the game. He can clear 85% of the content in game, and in terms of recommended mold investments, you can go 505, which is maxing out once again your skill 1 over here, as well as your skill 3. Now, you could choose to level up the passive if you'd like. His skill 2 if you'd like, but that's more so if you're struggling to survive, because all it does is increase your barrier strength. But if you're finding out that you're struggling to survive in certain stages, there's no harm in leveling up his S2 because it increases your barrier strength, and his barrier on S2 is pretty good. Now, I didn't put it down here, but like I mentioned before, something really important to note here is that his S3 has 50% effectiveness on this attack, meaning the required amount of effectiveness that you need to land debuffs on Brieg is significantly lowered. I'll talk about that a bit later when we get to the stat screen. Now, in terms of clearable content, is quite literally the exact same as FNA once again from the last video, so I did not change anything here, because anywhere you can use FNA, you can probably just use Brieg as well, because, well, they're both ice element, and they're both, once again, this character can clear like 85% of the content in the game. Alright, so let's talk about stats that you could use on this character. So some good stats are speed, health, defense, and some crit stats just like FNA. Your optional stats is effectiveness. Having a little bit does not hurt to increase your effectiveness count to above around 80 to around 100%, so that way you can tag on all bosses. And some bad stats are going to be your attack and effect resistance. These don't do anything for you. So here are the best artifacts here. And first we have Elbrus here. Now, if you remember, if we come back over to here, right? He has fighting spirit, and anytime he attacks with the S1, he gains 25% fighting spirit. So that means, like, if you are running a counter build, that means you can get this fighting spirit off turn. So running Elbrus Ritual Sword means that you can get attacks off turn, which means you can get more defense breaks off turn. So if you have pretty much average RNG, you should be able to consistently get more death breaks more often, assuming you're counter attacking. So Elbrus is not a bad option. If you want to build more damage on your Brieg, since he is an off tank, you don't want to build him as your main tank, any damage artifact will do. I do like Victorious Flag, and this is like glasses, mature sunglasses, which is a limited artifact, so you may not be able to get it. And last but not least, his own artifact is also pretty good, which increases his damage. Now, I don't hate having some damage reduction artifacts because it helps keep him alive, especially because building bulk stats on him is a little bit on the tougher side. So I do run POVs from time to time, and it works perfectly fine. And that's the same reasoning for Adamant Shield being in the same tier. And if you want some other damage increase artifacts, you could probably use these here. Simple Uni, you're probably going to be using on some other character, but if you want to use that so you can play at an elemental disadvantage, you can use that as well. And Arias I have in this tier, honestly I think it's more B tier, but because you want to play Brieg as an off knight, you want to play him as a knight that can deal a little bit of damage. It won't be as explosive as your primary DPS, but it will still provide some support and additional damage down the line. But if you want to play him as a main Arias tank, you can try it. I just think he's better as an off tank with damage. Alright, in terms of actual gear sets, 4-piece sets you can use speed, destruction, or counter set. These are all viable. And in terms of 2-piece sets, you can run crit chance, health, or pen set. This character is never stepping foot into PvP. This character is pretty bad in all forms of PvP content, so unlike Fene, a mini set is not very useful to you. And although Fene could be used in PvP, it's not like she's that good in PvP too, but Brieg, you're actually never putting this guy anywhere near PvP. Now, in terms of the early game, we're going to be looking for these stats here. So around 175 speed, it should be pretty easy to reach, to be honest with you, but early game, if you don't have the gear, you don't need to be too high on your stats. 85 crit chance is all you need because if you remember from earlier on his passive, you have this perception buff here. This perception buff gives you 50% crit chance, meaning you do not need to be at 100%. You can be at 85 and still be perfectly fine. 250 crit damage is usually your bare minimum crit damage you want to be on any damage dealer. Well, if you're like really low on like the low end, you can be around 220 crit damage, but 250 should be reachable since you don't even need 100% crit chance. For HP, it might be a little bit hard to do it early on, so just aim for around 20,000 or above, and a little bit of defense. Once you start to get more into the late game, you can start to stretch your stats a little bit more. So let's increase our speed so we're more faster, or generally faster than our DPS. We are going to increase our damage to 270 crit damage, and if you can get higher, sure. We're going to increase our HP to 21,000. We're going to try to get as close to 1300 defense, and compared to before, we're actually going to build a little bit of effectiveness so that way we can have an easier time tagging our bosses. Now, if you want to build more than this, I don't think it's bad, as long as you have within 15% of the boss's effect resistance value. So generally 30% is enough because that brings you to about 80 effectiveness, which for most like lower end bosses should be fine. But if you start to find maybe like higher end bosses that have around 100 effect resistance, maybe you could try pushing this value to like 40 or so, 40, 50. And there's the counter set build. It's pretty similar, but you just want to be a little bit more tankier. Speed is not super huge because assuming that you are countering on average, you will keep getting a 20% CR push. You want to try to be a little bit bulkier if you can, but roughly, if anything, I just have these stats here for reference if you want to go all in on the counter set build. But if anything, it will look more closer to probably this or this, well, one counter set. So here's some example builds you can take a look at. So here's Brieg on speed set. Now he isn't super fast, but he has the damage stats and bulk stats that we want. This is more for end game, and you can see we have 42 effectiveness, putting our effectiveness value at about a 92. Here's all the gear pieces. Even this here isn't even reforged here, but you can see these are pretty high statted pieces because these are some end game gear pieces. Here is the actual Brieg I usually run because why does he have a 20 speeder? Okay, that's quite interesting. I never knew he had a 20 speeder. Okay, I tried to find usually more usable gear, but I did not realize I had a 20 speeder on him. That's crazy. Anyways, this is kind of the stats I got with it. You don't need a 20 speed piece on your Brieg. Like I said before, on your counter set build, it is okay to run a little bit smaller speed so you can just gain some other stats. I actually completely didn't realize I had a 20 speeder on him though. As for combo units, deeming that you're going to be using him more likely than not with the top 4 characters on this row here, there isn't a lot I need to put here in terms of combo units because, well, he's pretty much usable with any other PvE character because he's an off tank that defense breaks and speed downs. He's pretty much generally usable with anybody. If you want to, once again, since he is going to be an off tank, you do want to have an Aura's holder with him. So your Aura's holders will be either Ross, Crow is usable, Tywin does provide an additional death break if you want to use him, and breaks out of control. An ambitious Tywin, if you do pick him up, he's not terrible in PvE content and allows for a debuff to spell. Once again, the top 4 is one of the best characters in the game. They usually should help you clear all content in the game, or 85% of the content in the game, because there's like certain things like Trials of Constellations where you need more specific teams, but otherwise, if you can use anything you really want, these characters will curb stomp it. And here are some general dual attackers. These characters don't have like highest attack duels, so as mentioned, every time he does a skill 1 attack, he gains 25 fighting spirit. So if you bring a general dual attacker that attacks at random, you have a chance of pulling Brieg, and if you keep pulling Brieg, that means you have more chances to defense break and get more additional damage. So these dual attackers are pretty good to use with him because you have a chance of pulling Brieg, which means more defense breaks, or you have a chance of pulling your DPS, which means more damage. Either way, it's pretty good, right? That being said, that is it for the build guide and review of Brieg. So if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one.